Hello everyone, RadLad here, and welcome back to yet another video. And today I make my long overdue return to the Metroid franchise. With Metroid Prime 4 Beyond finally being revealed, I feel as if it was finally time to give the series the spotlight on the channel once again. And what better way to bring back Metroid on the channel than with a design ranking? And while Samus may seem like the obvious contender for this ideal, I've opted to go for her fearsome nemesis, the cunning god of death himself, Ridley. This horrific beast is the leader of the evil space pirates and was responsible for killing Samus's parents when she was but a wee child, and he's continued to torment her over and over again throughout her many adventures as a bounty hunter. As such, Ridley is the third most reoccurring character in the series, just behind Samus and the Metroids themselves, and he's changed his look many times over the years, giving us a lot to unpack in this ranking. For this list, I'll mostly talk about how each design appears in the official games themselves, but we'll also use key art to help point out the finer details. Like always, this list is my opinion, and not objective whatsoever, so don't blow up my house with a power bomb if you disagree, especially since Adam hasn't authorized their use. But enough chit chat, let's rank these petrifying pterodactyls. For those unaware, Captain N was an old TV show that ran in the late 80s and early 90s that told the tale of a dude named Kevin Keene as he journeyed across Videoland in a quest to become Captain N, the Game Master, a hero destined to defeat the villainous Mother Brain from Metroid. And as you can see from her design, the creators of the show didn't exactly care to be game accurate. Admittedly, this show was made when most of these series only had one game and didn't have concrete designs in place yet, but how could they do this to my boy Ridley? Thankfully, our eyes don't have to behold this monstrosity for long, since he's just a brief cameo in the show, but good lord, this orange pot-bellied, green-haired doofus looks more like Kraid's hillbilly cousin than anything else. And how's this Ridley supposed to fly with those pathetically tiny wings? Fortunately, the comic series adapted from the show depicts the cunning god of death with full accuracy to the original game, which would be great if said game wasn't Metroid 1. Ridley's humble beginnings. Hard to believe this cute little bugger was responsible for brutally murdering Samus's parents right in front of her. According to Captain N, this iteration is too busy taking up a career in law, which actually shows how insanely intelligent this space pirate is. But this manual art is drastically different from what's seen in game, and even more so to the art in the Japanese manual, where we get to see this absolutely adorable chibi Ridley. Despite both of these manual designs being blue, Ridley is purple in-game, and that color would stick, as a majority of his appearances depict him with purple skin. In fact, this Ridley introduced a lot of the staple features later designs would reuse. The aforementioned purple skin, the spear-like tail, the two front-toed feet, the tube-like head, and a devilish smile befitting of his sadistic nature. While literally every design after this one did Ridley better, it's still a respectable first attempt at the character, and laid the important groundwork from which future designs would follow. Plus he started the trend of all sprite-based 2D Metroid Ridleys eating loads of fire flowers, because those fireballs look quite familiar. I ain't letting you get away with this blatant plagiarism, Ridley. No wonder you're a pirate. In the 2012 Wii U game Nintendo Land, there was a mode titled Metroid Blast, which served as a fun, casual romp through a Metroid-themed amusement park attraction. It was also about the closest thing we got to a new Metroid game on Wii U. But hey, it did give us the first HD rendition of Ridley. Kinda. This Ridley is merely a robotic recreation of the real deal, but he's still pretty freaking awesome nonetheless. He actually pulls a lot of design elements from the OG NES Ridley, namely with the smaller body frame, the green claws, eyes, and wings. Since he's fully robotic now, he's got some new abilities like having extendable arms and rotating claws show a Mecha Godzilla style. He also trades out his traditional fire breath for purple energy blasts and the lethal purple laser of death. You might be wondering why he has these power buttons on his hands, chest, tail, and inside of his mouth, but those are just how weak points in Nintendo Land are marked. I love how vibrant the green parts of his body are, with the wings being the clear standout, and the neon line across the rim of his head helps break up the purple. Not a fan of his eyes popping out awkwardly from his face though. However, the coolest thing about this version of Ridley is that he comes in a colder flavor as well. Ice Ridley. He has the same proportions and weak points as the normal Nintendo Land Ridley, except he has a white and neon blue color scheme, and this guy would be right at home in the Phendrana Drifts, and his ice beam shots and frozen death laser are sure to give any players a chill down their spine. While these two don't hold a candle to most of the characters' real appearances, they still have plenty of charm and are a fun addition to Nintendo Land. Fun fact, this was Ridley's first 3D appearance, and damn does it look like it because he ain't looking too hot. I can't be too hard on this design considering he appears in the game for a grand total of 2 seconds in the opening cutscene, and his only real pose is this deranged running swipe depicted in his trophy. The proportions of his body is what I take the most issues with. His head is too short in length, his fingers and toes are way too thin, and those claws look about as lethal as dollar store scissors. Also, what the hell is up with his tongue? I'm glad all later 3D incarnations opted for something more spindly because this one is just too thick. His constant open mouth expression mixed with his wide eyes honestly makes it look like Ridley is on coke. On the contrary, his color scheme is phenomenal, and the purple pops more than pretty much any other incarnation of the character, and those flame red wings are the cherry on top. This design is a little rough around the edges, but with some tweaking, it could definitely work. Hey, would you look at that? Sakurai's team did some tweaking and this is a solid upgrade. Well, besides the color scheme, I much prefer the vibrant purple over this grayish blue, and the wings could use a little more red to offset the yellow, but literally everything else is an improvement from his melee counterpart. Oversized tongue? Gone. Deranged trophy pose? Gone. The astoundingly short head? Gone. The super tiny claws at the end of his fingers and toes? Kind of fixed? Yeah, this design might be an upgrade, but it's not a very significant one. Plus, I really dislike how small his body is in comparison to his head. It looks like he'd fall over just by standing up with how gigantic his noggin is. And damn it, Ridley, lay off the coke already! I can still see it in your eyes. This design leaves a lot to be desired, but I'm sure the team learned a lot with these 2 attempts. Give them like 10 years, and I'm sure they'll have mastered his look by then. Well, here's the other fully mechanized Ridley, although he's not exactly finished. Apparently this unfinished robot was built by Ridley himself, but he couldn't see its construction all the way through because... Regardless, it still acts as the head of his ship and immediately engages Samus when she arrives at the ship's control room. Mecha Ridley can only move his head and arms, as the rest of his body is little more than metallic spaghetti. His entire body is formed out of silver metal with bright neon green lights running across his body. The only part that doesn't abide by these colors is his power core, protected by a thick glass covering that's probably made out of the same stuff that's surrounding Mother Brain's case. Because hot damn, that's some impressive glass for being able to withstand literal missiles being shot at it. Like most 2D Metroid bosses, Mecha Ridley's colors change as he takes more damage, and that'll be a consistent thing for the rest of the 2D Ridleys on this list. By the end of the fight, the silver turns into a dark red, and it looks totally radical-dadical. The way he moves reminds me of a bird bobbing its head, which makes it absolutely impossible for me to see this guy as intimidating, especially since his blindingly luminescent green eye makes him look plain goofy. It reminds me of Mecha King Ghidorah, and I wouldn't be surprised if Mecha Ridley was inspired by that cyborg. It certainly inherits all the issues that one's head had. Even though this guy is packing a flamethrower, eye lasers, back-mounted missile launchers, it's hard for it to be imposing when it's stuck in a tiny-ass room and can only crawl slowly towards its foes. By Super Metroid, Ridley's design had remained relatively consistent between games, but Other M changed things up, and a decent amount of it was for the better in my opinion. He's noticeably more muscular than previous incarnations, no longer having his twig-like appendages where you can literally see the bones. Not only that, but this new muscular skin appears to have allowed spikes to grow out from his ankles, elbows, and thighs, plus 2 pairs of small stylish ones by his cheeks that give his front-facing view a little more to work with, instead of looking awkward thanks to his elongated head. These cheek spikes were originally part of Super Metroid's Ridley design, and it took until this game for a 3D incarnation to adopt this feature. Another aspect I love is his color scheme, which is very similar to the one seen in Super Smash Bros. Melee, and like I said earlier, it's peak. The subtle scale pattern on the wings is a beautiful touch, and the detailed skin textures brings his character alive like never before. More so, when Samus injures him, you can see his green muscle tissue underneath. Oh, and those lime-colored eyes, done 100 times better than dopey Mecha Ridley over there. That isn't enough for ya? Well, don't worry, because while other Ridley's tales end in a spear, this bitch brought a damn sword. Well, that all sounds great, so why is he this low? Well, there's 2 reasons. Reason 1, I don't like the new 3 front-toed foot design, as the 2 front-toed one was more unique, and even in lore it doesn't make any sense why this was changed. This Ridley is actually a clone of the original that a rogue group of Federation scientists cloned off a sample of DNA they found on Samus' suit after she killed him in the events of Super Metroid. With that context in mind, If it's a clone, why does it have an extra toe now? Shouldn't it be identical to the one seen in Super? I can chalk up the muscular limbs and the spines as something a younger Ridley might have, but losing an entire toe? Not buying it. And I know he constantly changes size and color, but the two front toe look has basically been the only consistent thing about this Space Dragon's design. Not only that, but this Ridley is later drained by the Queen Metroid and his corpse is sent to the BSL station. Despite this, in Metroid Fusion, the corpse and subsequent clone of a clone has two front toes. Fusion came out before Other M, so there's no excuse with this discrepancy. Reason 2. What the hell is up with the mouth? The back of the head looks standard, but the flappy, extra thin mouth just doesn't work. I get his first form was a bird in this game, but they didn't need to give him a beak, especially since said bird didn't have a beak to begin with. Older games had the edges of his mouth bend downward when closing, giving it a fiercer appearance. Other M Ridley does the opposite, and it just looks wrong. This design is so close to being a masterpiece, but these two flaws, more so the mouth, keep it from true greatness. You know, I gotta be honest, I think 90% of the reason I like this guy is for his absurd screeches and because they're nostalgic to me, since his shrieks served as my alarm clock noise for most of high school. But this ain't a roar ranking, so his beautiful singing voice isn't gonna help him here. Neo Ridley, otherwise known as Ridley X, is a rather grotesque rendition of the Space Dragon. As mentioned before, this incarnation is actually the clone featured in Other M, but now cloned a second time by the X parasites. Like other X clones, this design has more exaggerated features compared to its original counterpart. This can be seen most prominently in this guy's overgrown talons that can tear right through Samus's fusion suit on account of her taking loads of damage whenever he picks her up. His head has also seen a significant mutation, with his upper jaw now overhanging his lower by a noteworthy degree. I will say I'm not a huge fan of the weird bumps of flesh on his lower jaw. Is he trying to grow a beard or something? Listen Brinstar, take one look at Godzilla Earth, and now they'll show you why that's a terrible idea. Adding to his unnatural vibes is his hunchback stance, and the freaky way his spine abruptly jerks in a different direction. His red eyes are also a glorious change, because nothing quite screams evil like bloody sclera staring into your very soul. The only thing that holds this guy back is his teeny tiny wings. How are those dinky things supposed to keep him airborne? If the X worked on making those at least twice the size, then we would have a certified banger on our hands. He may lack the wings of an angel, but at least he was granted the voice of one. After being blown to smithereens by Samus back on Zebes during her Zero mission, Ridley was reborn as a cyborg thanks to the space pirate scientists aboard the Frigate Orpheon. After having a brief reunion with Samus, he flies down to Talon 4 and explores the place for a while before ambushing Samus at the Chozo Artifact Temple right as she's trying to open the gateway to the Impact Crater. Can I just say this is easily the coolest arena that you ever fight Ridley in? Fighting in ancient Chozo ruins located on a cliffside while it's raining? Peak fucking fiction right there. This inaugural rendition of his cyborg self is also the most robotic a meta design has ever been. The only organic portions he has at this point is the top half of his head, most of his arm, some of his torso, and his thighs. His organic parts are actually kind of hard to make out in the game because his flesh is such a muted color that it blends into the metal. His wings are fully mechanical with a silver frame and translucent yellow webbing, and they can easily be seen from a mile away, which is convenient considering Meta Ridley can't go 10 seconds without zooming off into the distance and wasting Samus's time. You could honestly play through the entirety of Zero Mission in the time it takes him to show back up. This new form has also gifted him more offensive capabilities. He's now equipped with homing missile systems and a red kinetic laser beam that laid waste to the ancient Chozo Artifact Temple in record time. I love that you can see where the metal digs into his organic skin, and it's impressive how they conveyed it so well with the GameCube's low-res textures. It certainly looks better than a certain other cybernetic space dragon. However, this isn't Meta Ridley's only appearance, and I'd say out of all of them, this is the weakest incarnation. I think my biggest problem lies with the head. I appreciate the sadistic smile, but the metallic backside of his head hangs so low below where his organic upper jaw is, and it gives his front view this incomplete look. It's not a total deal breaker, but with how stacked this ranking lineup is, even a small flaw is enough to send you down to double digits. Well, you already know this one's goated since he uses my boy Anguirus' roars. This is the game where Ridley became the character we know him as today. His iconic skeletal form and zigzag neck, his grasping talons, his xenomorph-like elongated head filled with dozens of sharp teeth, and of course, his badass theme. He's also the first version of the Cunning God of Death to have spikes coming out from his cheek area, a detail that weirdly took until Other M and Smash Ultimate to return. This is the iteration from which all other forms of the character built off from, and it still holds up great in its own right, especially for a 30-year-old design. That being said, there are a couple things holding him back. The first is more of a limitation of the game's sprites, but he's locked in this sitting stance, with only one half of his body facing the screen at any time. This sitting stance isn't really the most threatening in the world, and it looks more like he's about to dump a big one. In official art, he has a more proactive stance, and his front-facing sprite seen on the series station is awesome. Also, like Fusion's design, the wings on this dragon are minuscule. I don't need them to be overbearing, but this is like Gronkle levels of disproportionate wings. Even with these things holding him back, this Ridley from '94 is still a masterclass in villain design. Well, doesn't this guy look familiar? This is basically just the meta Ridley from Metroid Prime 1, but with the body proportions of Brawl's normal Ridley. It has the features the original version had, but its cybernetic implants aren't as well integrated with his skin. It kind of looks like he's wearing a metal t-shirt and steel shorts, and while that's an annoying downgrade, it's made up for since this design fixes the color of his skin, making the purple more vibrant. Plus, the proportions of his head have been tweaked slightly to make it fit better with the rest of his body. The meta makeover also nullifies all the problems with the original organic Brawl design, with our boy finally free from his addiction. This version of Meta Ridley also continues the tradition of badass fight arenas, because he ambushes the heroes of Subspace Emissary as they try to escape an exploding island facility atop the Falcon Flyer. You gotta respect the sheer hatred he holds for Samus, as he literally puts all common sense and self-preservation on the back burner just so he has a shot at killing the bounty hunter. This is why you never kill the protagonist's mother. That shit will always bite you in the ass. He's back again, and once again little has changed between games, with this one simply being a higher quality model because it was made a full 10 years after Brawl. He's quite a lot smaller than his previous appearance, but that's because he's a playable character now after previously being deemed as too big for Smash. It does greatly improve upon the detailing of his cybernetics, once again making them look like as if they dig into his skin. Part of his upper jaw is still made of metal, and it convincingly attaches into his flesh, and even a part of his foot is still organic. Speaking of, you can now see the individual joints that make up his toes instead of it looking like a simple metal coating, and this carries into the whole design. Each limb has carefully crafted mechanisms and interlocking plates that make this mechanical beast feel all the more real. Stuff like the more defined tubing up his head and the complex structure of his wing skeleton also furthers this groundedness. It's crazy to think that a model this well crafted is in a fighting game, where the more intricate details are harder to make out. Crazier still, this is just a skin for the character, as his fully organic skin is what's the main representation of him in this game. Sakurai is an absolute overachiever, and I'll never stop appreciating the love he puts into his games. Metroid Prime Remastered is a contender for one of the greatest video game remakes ever made. The original 2002 GameCube title already looked phenomenal for its time, but Retro managed to make it look like a brand new release through remaking every asset from scratch. The textures, the models, the lighting system, the particle effects, etc. It looks so good that I argue it's the best looking game on Switch. Well, at least until Retro tops themselves when Prime 4 releases. This glow up in visuals can easily be seen with Meta Ridley. This takes the added detail of his Smash Ultimate version and bumps it up even further by removing the hunchback nature of said previous look, creating the definitive design for the original version of Meta Ridley. His vibrant purple flesh returns, and the metal has had its RTX turned on, and all the interlocking joints and mechanisms keeping him alive have never looked more finely engineered. Even his power core looks incredible, glowing like that of flowing magma. The implants in his spine are such a great touch, and harkens to the space pirates found in-game who share the same enhancement. Oh, and that new robotic crane-like joint that moves his neck? 'Tis a brilliant addition. And what makes this all better? His fighting arena is more gorgeous than ever, turning an already cinematic fight into a buffet for the eyes, and the ears as well, because nothing goes harder than Meta Ridley's theme. Despite having the name Neo Ridley, he barely resembles his other versions, and thank God, because I'll go mad explaining another iteration of what is the exact same design with just a few enhancements each time. For one, the color scheme is entirely unique, having this beautiful teal color mixed with purples and pink, and his wings have a more detailed membrane than ever before. His head is also very well proportioned to his body and looks intimidating from any angle, elevated by his constant sinister grin. His murderous attitude is portrayed amazingly in-game, since he can literally grab Samus and bitch slap her before unleashing his powerful plasma breath right into her face. It's not only cool in gameplay, but it's a 3D version of the same move he had in Zero Mission. It's a little hard to tell exactly what parts of him are organic now, but due to the lack of fully cybernetic implants like his metallic neck in Prime 1, it's safe to assume that this cybernetic dragon has a little more flesh on its bones. Now you may be wondering how his body is in better shape, considering the last time we saw him he was thrown off a cliff and promptly exploded into smithereens. Thankfully, through the power of Phazon and space magic, the space pirates were able to bring him back, and he's more vengeful than ever before. He's seen chasing Samus across Norian, first trying to eat her alive while she's in Morphball form before ambushing her at one of the base's generators, and making her experience the whole freefall thing. It backfires though, as the Huntress makes quick work of her old foe, leaving him to tumble down the pit while she's saved by the man, the myth, the legend, Rundus. Surely he won't survive another fall like that, right? Oh, for the love of... Wow, another cybernetic Ridley, but at least this one is more unique since he's not part of the Meta family. Taking the title of Proteus, this is the only cybernetic version of Ridley that has appeared outside of the Metroid Prime sub-series. Thanks to his inclusion in Samus Returns, it means that the canonicity of the Prime trilogy that was brought into question by Other M is no longer a factor. Proteus Ridley acts as a clear transitory stage for the dragon from Omega Ridley to his original organic form seen in Super Metroid. Now, if I were to judge him solely on his concept design, he'd be number 1 in this ranking with no questions asked. I mean, come on, this is literally the coolest damn creature I've ever seen in my life. Unfortunately, this concept had to be translated into a 3DS game, and compromises were clearly made. Regardless, this is still a fantastic design. Unlike the cavalcade of Meta Ridleys, this one's wing membrane is fully organic despite still being strung up by the metal wireframe. Although they've been shredded up a slight amount, so he probably should have just stuck with the synthetics. His head is almost completely healed, and one arm and foot have been freed of their metal shackles. It's clear that he's almost fully healed for the first time since Zero Mission, and you know what, I'm happy for him. Too bad Samus and the baby Metroid don't share the sentiment. The Huntress fills the poor bastard's mouth with a platoon of super missiles right when he finally relinquished the need for a metallic jaw, and I gotta say, I think this is the best looking his head has ever looked. The proportions are immaculate, and he's got his signature murderous grin. It also helps that this is by far the best Ridley fight in the entire series gameplay-wise. Words cannot describe how badly I want an HD remake of Samus Returns, exclusively so we can see this design with textures that don't look like a jumbled mess of colors. For the older viewers of my channel, you're in for a treat, as I'm about to praise Zero Mission for at least a minute straight. This design kicks ass and a lot of it. This design is basically a 32-bit upgrade on his Super Metroid look, and it's gorgeous, made even better as we get further detailed glimpses at this design through the game's cutscenes, including a quick peek into the dragon's room aboard the pirate mothership where he's seen staring out towards the space around him, sitting ominously on his perch. He's been sized up since Super, and while some may say he's too big, I disagree. The bigger the better. Although like Neo Ridley, his sprite might be a little too demanding on the GBA, especially when you start using the charge beam. They also nerfed his scream in Zero Mission. That was the best part of his fight last time, and they gutted it! Those bastards! Wait, I'm supposed to be positive. I like the sheer length of his arms, which makes it all the more terrifying when he casually picks up Samus before blasting Mario-patented fireballs right into her face. And those flame red wings from Smash Melee make a return, and it's nice to see on an in-game design, even if they are a little small for my tastes. This Ridley also forgoes the purple for an earthly green skin color. While I obviously prefer purple, I think this difference in color is deliberate. This is canonically Ridley's first appearance in the series timeline, so maybe this was his natural skin color, and its purple coloration is what it decayed into. And due to all the tomfuckery that happened to him in the Prime trilogy, his purple coloration remained even when his skin regrew. Sure, Other M shoots a hole in this theory, but that game couldn't even get how many toes Ridley had right, so it doesn't get a word in this conversation. Whether or not this theory has any ground to stand on is up to debate, but it doesn't change the fact that this design is a masterpiece. Even if the game itself is anything but that, because Zero Mission is nothing but an overrated, overhyped piece of... Ridley finally hit the big time by making his playable appearance in a Smash Bros. Game, and he brought with him one of his absolute best designs ever. 6 years later, and this is still his highest quality organic design, basically being a fully 3D version of his Super Metroid iteration, and it's a beauty. Every bone and every fold of his sickly flesh is filled with gorgeous detail. They also brought back his cheek spikes and added some forehead ones for good measure. My favorite new detail is the stretch of darker skin surrounding his eye, as it does an immaculate job at breaking up the lighter purples and highlights his fearsome stare more than ever before. The only real issue with this design is its size. He's returned to his NES size, and that's understandable given the context of the game, and hey, being able to finally play as this bloodthirsty reptile after so many years makes this criticism obsolete. Also, all of his alts referencing past iterations of his character is the cherry on top. This is the single best version of organic Ridley that we've ever seen, and I have a feeling it's going to be a long time until he's top. Seems like somebody has feather falling and blast protection on their armor because the cunning god of death is back and more powerful than ever. Suppose it's rather fitting that his best design of all time is also the most powerful he's ever been in the series. Given the title of Omega, this Ridley is completely corrupted with Phazon and guards the Leviathan seed of the pirate homeworld. This design basically combines the classic elements of OG Meta Ridley with Prime 3's version, creating the perfect fusion. Thanks to the redone color scheme, it's easier to make out his organic body parts, and instead of entire limbs being organic, bits and pieces of him all over are integrated with his cybernetics. He's also acquired more resistant armor that is nearly impossible to penetrate unless you happen to have an X-ray visor and a Nova Beam to shoot at its joints, which Samus just so happens to have, but hey, it gives Ridley more time to unleash his cavalcade of new attacks upon his nemesis. He's got the usual Plasma Breath, tail swipes, and lunge tackles that you'd expect by this point, but the Phazon corruption has granted him further abilities. The most flashy are these Phazon energy spheres that he can charge up to launch at Samus. His wings retain the same design as Prime 3 Meta Ridley, albeit slightly muted in color, and his head shape is just as good as that one's too, except it incorporates more of his real flesh, breaking up the silver. Overall, I gotta say, the variance of colors on this guy is fantastic, as previous versions played it safe with just purple and silver with some yellow in the eyes, but Omega Ridley mixes this with the ethereal blues of Phazon to create an artful display. The only thing I wish was different with this guy is for him to be slightly bigger. Ironically, Meta Ridley from Corruption is actually larger, but this is just a slight nitpick as there's nothing significant enough to snatch this dragon's right to the crown as the king of the Ridleys. This was probably the most challenging ranking video I've ever had to do on this channel. Normally I have a clear idea who's number 1, but the top 4 on this list could honestly all be contenders for the top spot depending on how I feel on a given day. It's genuinely impressive how amazingly well designed this character has been throughout his nearly 40 years of existence. There are very few duds in this pile, as a majority were just straight bangers. Even though it's unlikely he'll return in Prime 4, I'd still be down to see the purple space pterodactyl pirate dragon show up and team up with Sylix to give Samus her toughest fight ever. Let me know what your favorite designs were in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out the other design rankings I've done for Godzilla, Mechagodzilla, and King Ghidorah. This video also ain't my first rodeo with the Metroid series, as about half the videos on this channel are all about the series. But next time, I shall return to the Godzilla franchise, as a certain queen has waited patiently for her turn in the spotlight. But until then, have a wonderful day.